Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Fossil Warrior Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile for post Battles of Legends Chapter 1. Wanted to update the deck with the more availability of the Fossil Warriors thanks to the release of Battles of Legends Chapter 1. They made some of the more pricier Fossil Warrior cards more readily available, meaning so you'll just have to go into the Ghost from the Past 2 to pick up some of the added support for the Fossil Warrior deck, but also mixing it with some of the pretty generic rock support that we've had throughout the last couple years to really make the deck work with its Fossil Fusion setup, and then just being able to go into the many different fusion monsters while even being able to use your opponent's resources. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with the main deck monsters. We still run the 3 Weathering Soldier. When it's destroyed by battle or sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can add 1 Fossil Fusion or 1 card that mentions it, except for Weathering Soldier, from your deck to your hand. You only use this effect once per turn, and once per turn during end phase, it loses 600 attack. Being a 2000 attack by monster, it's just a way to reduce the power scale of this card, but it's mostly to be used for the setup to get our many different spells that not only have Fossil Fusion, but also Fossil Fusion in the name, so plenty of those resources to rely on thanks to this monster. We also run 3 copies of Flint Kragger. If it's special summon, you can discard 1 card. And if you do, send 1 Fossil Fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. And you can send this card from the field to the graveyard to inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent. And then if Fossil Fusion's in your graveyard, you can return it to your graveyard, one of your banished cards that is Fossil Fusion or mentions it. So Flint Kragger has more of a recycle option in the deck. If you wanted to run, the 1 card I don't have for the deck is Shell Knight. You can drop down 1 copy of Flint Kragger for a copy of Shell Knight. I just don't know where any of my copies of Shell Knight went off to, but it's another card I do want to run in the deck, so you can just place it in one of the spots for Flint Kragger, with one of our other monsters being our Reptia Egg. It cannot be destroyed by battle. If it was normal summoned during the standby phase of the summoning player's next turn, you can tribute this card to special summon up to 3 level 4 lower reptile and or rock monsters from your hand and or deck, but banish them during the end phase. If you special summon 2 or more monsters, they must have the same name. So it helps for just some of the other rock monster setup that we mentioned before to be able to summon out a good variety of monsters out onto the field using this last monster resource for those summons as well. And also running a small Adamancipator package, so 3 copies of Researcher and also 2 copies of Seeker and the 1 copy of Analyzer. Since they're not the main focus of the deck, they're just mostly here to help special summon out some of the other rock monsters that I run in the deck to then have on the field for our fusion summons for Fossil Fusion, and then just being able to seek out those additional cards by excavating the top 5 cards of your deck and have an easy special summons just if you control a rock monster, an Adamancipator monster, or if your opponent controls a monster in the form of Analyzer. I also run 3 copies of Cartharin, the Hidden Gem of the Seafront. You can discard this card to normal summon 1 earth or water monster in addition to your normal summon during the main phase this turn. You're going to get this effect once per turn. If you control an earth or water monster while this card's in the graveyard, you can special summon it but banish it when it leaves the field. You can always each effect of Cartharin once per turn, but just another resource to grab back onto the field. Some of the fusions for Fossil Fusion just require cards like a level 4 lower monster, so Cartharin can help just to be the required monster needed for that summon. And then also for more special summon power, 2 copies of Doki Doki for the discard of a rock monster to special summon 1 rock monster from the same original attribute and level as that monster in face-up attack or face-down defense from your deck to the field to grab those fusions once again for you to use. And also the 1 copy of Rock Band Xeno Guitar. If it's sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 rock monster in your graveyard except for Rock Band Xeno Guitar, add to your hand, then place 1 card from your hand on the top of your deck. So it helps with the excavating power as well, giving you a rock monster on the top of the deck to use with the Adamancipator monsters that we also run as well. And if this card's banished from the field or graveyard, you can send 1 rock monster from your deck to the graveyard. You're going to use each effect of Rock Band Xeno Guitar once per turn, with the last of our main deck monsters being 3 copies of Nibiru, also being useful for some of our other summons. If we don't use it to tribute out our opponent's monsters, we can also use it for fusion plays like cards like Fossil Warrior Skull King, needing a level 7 or higher monster, which Nibiru fits that role. Moving on now to the spells, we're running 3 copies of Fossil Fusion. You fusion summon 1 Fossil Fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing fusion materials mentioned on it from any graveyards, except for materials with the specific grade requirements listed. If you banish monsters from both graveyards, neither player can target that special summon monster with monster effects. If a face-up Fossil Fusion monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect while this card's in your graveyard, you can add this card to your hand. You can only use this effect of Fossil Fusion once per turn, but it's that resource grab, being able to use cards in your opponent's graveyard depending on the fusion we go into. It can be be a good variety of different monsters for us to also add back, thanks to Fossil Fusion, and then just being able to go into the many different fusion monsters that we run in the extra deck as well. I also run 3 copies of Specimen Inspection. Reveal 1 Fossil Fusion in your hand to send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard to declare a type and level. Then your opponent looks at their hand and deck and sends 1 monster with the declared type and level from one of them to the graveyard, if possible. You can activate 1 Specimen Inspection per turn, but this is so you can, if you know your opponent's deck, have them send 1 card from their deck to the graveyard and then be able to utilize that additional card for your own fusion summons. Also 3 copies of Miracle Rupture. You send 1 level 4 lower rock monster from your deck to the graveyard, then if Fossil Fusion's in your graveyard, draw 1 card. You can activate 1 Miracle Rupture per turn, but more setup and draw power. You're giving yourself the rock monsters you need, whether it be cards like Rock Band Xeno Guitar or any of the other ones we run in the deck, in the graveyard to then make use of for your fusion plays, and an additional draw to make up for the spell to begin with. Also, the one option for the deck as well is I do want to run 2 time streams. Sadly, I only had the 1 that I pulled from the Battles of Legends Chapter 1 set. So you do want to run 2. You target a Fossil Fusion monster you control, tribute it, and if you do, special summon 1 Fossil Fusion monster from your extra deck whose original level is 2 or higher than that monster's. This is treated as a fusion summon with Fossil Fusion, and during main phase, except the turn it was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card and 1 Fossil Fusion monster from your graveyard to target a Fossil Fusion monster in your graveyard and special summon it. So you're going into some of our more, evolved fossil monsters, using our other ones, being able to then go for the level 2 or higher monster, treating it as a Fossil Fusion and summoning it out onto the field. And then for the rest of the spells, 3 copies of Adamancipator Signs, just more resources to grab from the graveyard back onto the field, targeting a rock monster and special summoning it. And if it was an Adamancipator monster, you can take a level 4 lower rock monster and place it on top of your deck. This card's also not a once per turn, so just great to keep grabbing those different rock monsters to special summon onto the field. And lastly, the 1 copy of Monster Reborn and the 1 Call by the Grave. I don't like to run any traps in the deck just because we're focusing mostly on that fusion combo setup, so if you end up having any traps in your hand, they really don't have to provide much for the actual playstyle of the deck. For the extra deck, we're running 2 copies of Fossil Warrior Skull King. It must be special summoned with Fossil Fusion. It can make a second attack during each battle phase. If it attacks a defense monster, inflict piercing battle damage. During your opponent's turn, quick effect, you can target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, discard 1 card to special summon that monster to your field. You can use this effect of Fossil Warrior Skull King once per turn. It needs a rock monster and a level 7 or higher monster to make it, so pretty easy to summon out this card onto the field, and then just being able to use your opponent's own resources against them. We also run the 2 copies of Fossil Warrior Skull Knight. It must first be special summon with Fossil Fusion, needing a rock monster and a level 5 or 6 monster. If it attacks a defense monster, inflict piercing battle damage, and when this attacking card destroys a monster by battle, you can activate this effect. It can make a second attack in a row, and you can banish this card from your graveyard to target 1 monster on the field and destroy it. So destruction power on top of the piercing battle damage and potential second attack it can also do. Also 2 copies of Fossil Warrior Skull Bone. Must first be special summoned with Fossil Fusion. Can make up to 2 attacks on monsters during each battle phase. And also you can banish it from your graveyard to add 1 time stream from your deck to your hand. So being able to add the lower number spell that we run in the deck off of this fusion as well. With some of our Fossil Dragons consisting of Fossil Dragon Skullgar and Yugioh, just to use as some of the higher level monsters to then summon out into the field. Using also monsters from our opponent's graveyard to summon these cards out. And then also the 1 copy of Fossil Machine Skull Buggy, the 1 copy of Skull Wagon, and Skull Convoy, needing more of the resource level monsters and rock monsters to summon out this line of monsters out onto the field as well. With our Adamancipator monsters, we're also running a small lineup for the synchro monsters that you can summon out with the Adamancipator monsters onto the field, and then make use of the reveal of the top cards of your deck to excavate and add and special summon rock monsters or different Adamancipator monsters that we run in the deck as well, with the last card in the extract just being the 1 copy of Nightmare Phoenix. If you want to run Gallant Granite, you can always run that as well as a NXT's monster to use, just needing 2 level 4 monsters to then have a rock monster search as well in the deck. And then as for some of the go-to plays, it comes down to really just that setup with Fossil Fusion. If you can go for your fusion play, then you start the steady stream of being able to go into your bigger and bigger fossil monsters, depending on the cards you use for the summon. And also, if you were to go into some specifics, it also helps just to set up cards in your opponent's graveyard, depending on what you want, with cards like Specimen Inspection. That comes down to knowing what your opponent's running, knowing what card they have in their decks to be able to send to the graveyard, to then use with your own rock monsters to summon out using your Fossil Dragon cards, or just using your higher level monsters along with your other rock monsters to get out the other Fossil Warrior monsters. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed, and as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.